Tonight, the biggest battle yet against ISIS is underway with the help of U.S. warplanes and American special forces. The target is Iraq's second largest city, Mosul. Kurdish forces and Iraqi troops are surrounding Mosul to force its liberation after 2 years of occupation. Hundreds of thousands of civilians are in the crossfire. War correspondent Holly Williams was outside Mosul today when the first shots were fired.
Over the last few days, we've seen video emerging from inside Mosul of what appear to be U.S. coalition airstrikes. U.S. coalition airstrikes inside the city.
Holly and her crew were fine, but it was the start of an eventful day.
Just after dawn, they broke through the front line. A column of tanks and armoured vehicles rolling into ISIS territory. These men are Kurdish fighters who've joined with the Iraqi army and local militiamen to push ISIS out of Mosul, a combined force thought to be more than 20,000 strong.
These Kurdish fighters are trying to move in that direction and retake the main road to Mosul. But ISIS has lit fires in villages there and there to try to shield themselves from airstrikes.
It didn't work. U.S. coalition strikes pounded ISIS today, and the extremists lost more territory and more fighters. But the battle so far is only on the outskirts of Mosul, a handful of farming villages long emptied of civilians, now an apocalyptic landscape. ISIS fought back with suicide bombers. One car laden with explosives drove dangerously close to where we were standing before it was blown up by an anti-tank missile. ISIS doesn't fight as well as it used to, and their morale is down, Colonel Jadagadi told us. That's why they're using more suicide bombers. But a desperate enemy is a dangerous one, and the battle for Mosul is just beginning.
The U.S. military says there are fewer than 5,000 ISIS fighters left in Mosul, but they're preventing around 1 million civilians from leaving, using them as human shields. Meanwhile, Scott, the roughly 6,000 American troops here are acting in what the U.S. government insists is an advisory role.
And the fall of Mosul not expected for many weeks. Holly Williams reporting from Iraq. Holly, thank you.
A 25-year-old man from Springfield was arrested Friday evening after police say he stabbed a father and daughter. Springfield Police Sergeant John Delaney told 22 News Ernesto Rivera got into a fight with a pair who were walking on State Street. The victim said Rivera almost struck them with his truck while turning. They began fighting and both the father and daughter were stabbed. They have since recovered. Rivera is charged with assault and battery with a dangerous weapon.
Developing story from Yukon this morning. Students there planning a vigil for later on today to remember a student killed this past weekend.
The school and police say she was hit by a fire department truck early Sunday morning.
News 8's Ken Pierce live in News 8 Control this morning with what her family says happened. Good morning, Ken.
Good morning, Jocelyn and Keith. It just doesn't make sense. That's what the family of Jeffney Pally says about the official explanation of her death. Why would a 19-year-old college student end up sitting behind the campus firehouse at 1:30 in the morning? Well, her family and friends have been trying to piece together where Pally was and when on this past Saturday night. There was a phone call with her parents around 9, a Snapchat with a cousin at 12:30, and then just an hour later, police say she was hit and killed by an emergency vehicle. They say the student was sitting on the ground with her back against one of the bay doors at the very back of the Yukon firehouse. The door opened and she fell backwards into the bay, and a fire department SUV responding to an emergency call hit her and killed her. The driver says he didn't even know he had done it until he came back an hour and a half later. That's what officials are saying.
But we have different news coming up now that it's very doubtful of what how the school is reporting this.
She says she just wants to know the truth, even if the truth is ugly and uncomfortable. The medical examiner has already ruled the death an accident. We're still waiting for the toxicology report that would show whether there were drugs or alcohol in her system. In the meantime, there is that vigil planned for 7 o'clock tonight at the Fairfield Way on the Storrs campus. Her funeral will be Thursday morning in her hometown of West Hartford. Live from News 8 Control, I'm Kent Pierce. Jocelyn and Keith.
Ken, in addition to the vigil you just talked about, is the school planning to do anything to help students deal with this tragedy?
Yeah, certainly. As is kind of standard procedure with something like this, there are grief counselors available on campus, and they're not just for the students, because think of the firefighters who came back from that emergency call to find that one of their own vehicles had accidentally hit a student. So grief counselors for them, too.
Kent Pierce reporting live. Thank you.
Palestinians in Gaza have held a rally to commemorate the 5th anniversary of a prisoner swap deal that helped secure the release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. In late 2011, Hamas agreed to release Israeli soldier Gilad Shalit in exchange for over 1,000 Palestinian prisoners.
The prisoner swap deal was modeled after Hezbollah's. Palestinian and Lebanese resistance movements have been and will continue to stand united against all Zionist schemes. Hezbollah has also helped secure the release of Palestinian prisoners in the past.
According to prisoners' advocacy groups, there are over 7,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, including minors and women. The number of minors in custody has rapidly increased since the beginning of the new Palestinian uprising that began in October last year. Activists have been criticizing the international community, especially Arab countries, for their inaction on relieving the plight of Palestinian prisoners.
There's a lot of suffering in Israeli prisons and detention centers, especially for women and children. Children do not belong in prisons, they belong in schools. Palestinian detainees suffer tremendously during interrogations, and we blame Arab countries, the Arab League and the UN Security Council for failing to have Palestinian prisoners.
Former Palestinian prisoner Ayman Sharawny, who went on hunger strike for several months in 2012, has called for more prisoner exchange deals.
As we mark the 5th anniversary of the swap deal, we want the world to know that the resistance has forced Israel into releasing our prisoners. Thousands of Palestinian prisoners are waiting for the next deal to be reunited with their families and their loved ones.
Palestinians say that more prisoner exchange deals will be made in the near future to free thousands of Palestinian prisoners who are still languishing in Israeli prisons. Ashraf Shannon, Press TV.
Thanks for joining us for 22 News at Noon. I'm Rich Teddemer. A man from Springfield has died after being stabbed in Worcester. 23-year-old Julian Holly was found lying in the middle of Harding Street early Sunday morning after officers responded to a report of a large fight. According to Worcester Police Department's Facebook page, Holly suffered several stab wounds and died at a local hospital. 4 years ago, Holly was a suspect in the murder of 18-year-old Keogh Collins of Springfield. At the time, Springfield police said that Holly was the getaway driver. Then 18-year-old Shawnee Duke was eventually convicted of Collins' murder.
It has been a violent day in the city of Mosul, where the battle to recapture the ISIS-controlled region is currently underway. Iraqi forces operating with air and ground support from American troops launched an offensive to drive militants out in a push to win back the ISIS stronghold. Joining me now via Skype from Erbil, Iraq, is Michael Georgi, special correspondent for Reuters. Michael, thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate it. I want to ask you about Kurdish forces. They broke through the front line today, as we're hearing, trying to retake that main road from ISIS. Was today successful from your vantage point for the pro-government forces?
Well, it's still very early on. The Kurds are basically started some action south of Mosul, but there hasn't been very heavy fighting, and it's not expected for about another 5 to 6 days. The Kurds are expected to hold positions so that civilians fleeing Mosul will have a safe place to stay. So I don't think they'll be leading this charge, and it'll be Iraqi forces and counterterrorism forces that'll be taking up most of the heat.
Can you talk a little bit about how the U.S. coalition is involved in this fight at this point?
Yes, the coalition has been carrying out airstrikes for a while. That's why, well, across Iraq, ISIS has been weakened, and of course it'll be vital support. But I think it's going to be weeks or months, and it's very unpredictable what will happen inside Mosul. You have a Sunni city. You have a federal police force that is sometimes infiltrated by Shiite militias. So the big challenge will be not only taking Mosul, but making sure there'll be no sectarian tensions afterwards. And if they manage to do that, then there's a chance for better stability in Iraq. But it's very volatile. You have the UN warning that ISIS could take hostages, human shields. So it's still very uncertain, and it's very early at the moment.
Yeah, it's a very, very, very scary time. I know once things kind of settle down, the United Nations likes to get in there in humanitarian crisis mode. Do we know kind of what their plan is for getting inside the city? And if so, what level of concern they have for the people still living in Mosul at this point? Maybe how they're preparing, if you even can right now?
Well, the problem for the United Nations is a lot of the aid money is going to Syria for these kinds of activities that they're undertaking. They have plans for about 22 sites. They've done 6 sites so far, which aren't complete. They don't have the money they need because of, for various reasons, donors haven't given money. So they're on sort of a shoestring budget, and for the moment, they're not planning to go into Mosul. They're going to be outside. The situation is too volatile. So I don't think, they're confident that everything will automatically go smoothly.
Yeah, very tough times there. Michael Giorgi in Iraq for us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
The man who shot at George Zimmerman during a road rage incident last year is being sentenced to 20 years in prison. Matthew Apperson says that he shot at George Zimmerman's truck in self-defense after Zimmerman aimed at him with his gun. But Zimmerman says that account of the May 2015 incident is a lie. The bullet did not hit Zimmerman, but he suffered minor injuries from shattered window glass. Apperson's 20-year sentence is a state-mandated minimum for anyone who shoots at another person. Zimmerman famously walked free after fatally shooting Trayvon Martin, an unarmed black teenager, in 2012. He was a neighborhood watch volunteer at the time and claimed self-defense. Earlier this year, he auctioned off the gun that he used to kill Trayvon Martin. It reportedly sold for 6 figures.
Stay at home and stay clear of places frequented by jihadists. That's just one of the warnings printed on these leaflets. They were dropped over Mosul by the Iraqi army before they started their offensive to recapture the city from Islamic State militants. The Prime Minister hailed the start of what he called a heroic operation.
The hour of victory has arrived and operations to liberate Mosul have begun. Together, we'll punish the crimes that have been carried out by the Islamic State group, and together, we will rebuild.
The city is a stronghold of the jihadist group, and they're expected to fight hard as the assault begins. A fierce row unfolded over who should take part in the battle, with Turkey determined to play a key role.
It's clear where we stand when it comes to Mosul. This assault should start with the Iraqi army and local forces, not with Shiite militias. We should not force people in the region to make a choice between the Islamic State group and Shiite militias that attack Sunni groups.
Turkey claims it wants to protect ethnic Turkmen living in northern Iraq and has voiced concerns PKK rebels will take part in the assault. What's certain is that the Iraqi Peshmerga forces from autonomous Kurdistan are leading the offensive.
Overseas tonight into the biggest offensive against ISIS yet. American troops helping the Iraqis, U.S. airstrikes. Thousands of Iraqi troops advancing on Mosul. And take a look tonight. Iraqi forces approaching the city, a line of tanks there, and watch the left side of your screen. ISIS responding with suicide bombers inside cars. Driving right toward those tanks, at least a dozen attacks like that one there already. ABC's Alex Marquardt on the front lines in Iraq tonight.
Just after dawn, Iraqi tanks rolled into battle. Artillery and airstrikes pounded ISIS positions. The offensive officially underway to retake Mosul from ISIS.
That was one of the rockets heading out down towards into the plains around the city of Mosul. As the sun has come up.
But as the day wore on, the terrorist group showed it was not going down without a fight. This suicide truck bomber careened into a line of Iraqi tanks, then exploded. Giant flames shooting towards the sky. Another drove towards a Kurdish convoy, the troops yelling as they spot the attacker. Then the sound of the explosion. ISIS claimed 12 suicide bombings in the battle today, backing the anti-ISIS forces, American troops, advising and calling in airstrikes like those we saw throughout the day on a Kurdish base. That progress seen from a drone, abandoned villages that the advancing forces now warn may be booby-trapped.
The fighters tell us that the biggest obstacle to their advance is the deadly IEDs all along the roads. So even with considerably greater firepower, moving forward can be complicated and slow.
Well, 2 men are in custody after a deadly gunfight at a party in Los Angeles, but police are still seeking more. 3 people were killed and a dozen others wounded at an informal restaurant where a birthday party was being held. The shootout may have started over a drug deal. Many of those involved are Jamaican nationals. Police in Lexington, Kentucky have arrested a man in connection with the fatal shooting of the daughter of Olympic sprinter Tyson Gay. 15-year-old Trinity Gay was shot about 4 a.m. in the parking lot of a restaurant. Like her father, the teen was also a track star at her high school. Police say she was caught in a crossfire and are looking for other suspects.